While the next speakers are coming up, I just want to do a quick couple of housekeeping. I'll touch upon this at the end of the session as well. But we're going to take a break after this session. So again, have a chance to perhaps visit some of the sponsors out there, grab a refreshment. But then after the break, we are going to be going into concurrent sessions. So this is Forum A. Right beside us is Forum B. We're going to be talking about generative AI and sustainability and consumers. So in the next room. But for now, I'd like to welcome Michelle and Martim. I will let them introduce themselves, in a second. I want to give a shout out to Michelle here. We were talking if Guelph had a Hall of Fame, she would be kind of one of the inaugural inductees, and perhaps in the like 5-time hosts of Saturday Night Live. Perhaps we need to have a Guelph, blazer or something like that. But with that, Michelle, please.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Michelle Frank. And I do want to start and just recognize what is going on in the world today. And as a Jewish American, my hearts go out to Israel and all of the innocent lives that have been lost and the tragedy that is going on there. So, my thoughts and prayers are with my family and my community out in Israel. So hope you guys can also take the time to recognize and honor just the devastation that's going on over there. Yeah. So thank you. Professionally, though, I have spent the better part of 2 decades in the e-commerce world. Spent the first half of my career in fashion and retail brands in North America e-commerce businesses, and then took what I learned over there and had an opportunity to move into the consumer electronics world to help run global e-commerce businesses and launch global e-commerce sites around the world. And a lot of people ask me, how did you move from fashion to tech? And I think what we'll talk about today is really that running a global e-commerce business is about meeting customer expectations and delivering on a great customer seamless experience and frictionless experience. And product comes secondary. And so that's really what I've learned in this e-commerce business, and excited to talk about some of the great brands and projects and opportunities we've had launching. Thank you.
And Martim, welcome to the Guelph stage.
Thank you very much.
We have had, we've really enjoyed our long-standing relationship with ESW, but first time for you. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for having me as well, Jim and Michelle. Myself, I'm Martim Oliveira. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for ESW. I've been with the business for 3 years now, and I oversee our global go-to-market strategy. Like Michelle, I moved from fashion to tech. Before, I spent 10 years in Hong Kong with a company called Li & Fung, where I run global sourcing predominantly for apparel brands as well.
And no doubt, had a fascinating decade, like over there. Yeah. Martim, let's talk. You heard Kent and I talk, open up the day, just talking about how we've really been observing, the business models changing. I think this is something that Michelle has certainly been living through. But just let's start with how you guys are defining multi-local.
All right. So look, for us, this is an evolution of cross-border. And for those of you who are not familiar with ESW, we describe ourselves as a direct-to-consumer platform. So we help brands to scale and to do internationally right. So we make sure that we deliver sustainable, profitable growth, and we remove all the complexities for one to operate at scale. And from localizing your checkout experience, enabling currencies, languages, to managing duty, trade, tax compliant customer declaration forms, turning on the right payment methods, and making sure we take ownership on fraud. And of course, a big component of what we do is the logistics piece, from first mile to last mile delivery, managing returns and refunds. What we're seeing in the marketplace is that we describe multi-local as cross-border grown-up, cross-border maturing, and the evolution of cross-border. So as you see markets getting saturated in their domestic markets and demand softening, we see an opportunity for international. And therefore, what we think is that multi-local is the ability for brands to replicate a domestic experience in an international market and across every single stage of the shopper journey. So from demand generation to promotions aligned with local holidays, enabling hybrid fulfillment models, and we talked today about different fulfillment models. And when we talked hybrid, think positioning inventory in country and really unlocking that omni-channel unified commerce experience for brands. Ultimately, what we're seeing with some of our partners that move from a cross-border to a multi-local model, we're definitely seeing an improvement on the overall e-commerce proposition. And if you ask me what's in it for brands, we're seeing the ability to maximize inventory, giving access to consumers to a global catalog. We're seeing less markdowns. We're seeing enhancement in operational margins. And with that, we're seeing cash flow. You're strengthening your cash flow position.
Thank you. No, that is, I think, a fascinating kind of definition, because certainly we are seeing, this evolution, right? And, Michelle, this does seem to almost parallel, like your career in some respects. Does that make sense to you in terms of, kind of a concept of multi-local, and in a sense, where are we going next?
Yeah, I mean, it differs for every brand, for every company, for every country, for every region. So it's really understanding what your goals and objectives are, and then also understanding local customers and expectations to be able to really map out what the correct strategy is. And it's about being nimble and agile to do so. There is no one playbook to go in each country, in each region. It really does differ, and you're never going to get it right at the first try. So it's really about being able to be nimble so you can iterate. And the beauty of relying on partners is that allows you to iterate to meet those customer expectations and demands.
Are there any markets that, whether from Logitech or Harman before, where you were, really pursuing that domestic equivalent, kind of customer experience?
Yeah, well, the differences between those two companies is the local presence and distribution.
Yeah.
So Harman really had more of a setup in market, so that we can really rely on local distribution and be able to have that foundation that was already built, so that we can really plug and play and start setting up e-commerce operations. So it allowed us to be a little bit more hands-on and operational. However, at Logitech, there was conscious decisions to rely more heavily on distributors. So that foundation wasn't already there for e-commerce operations. And so that's when, we found partners to help us be able to do that, more cost-effectively and efficiently, and, to meet our customer demands.
Yeah, talk a little bit around, when you joined Logitech, it was pretty nascent, let's say, in terms of the whole consumer direct. So were the kind of conversations you were having that we're not ready for a domestic equivalent quite yet? Is that how it went?
Yeah, D2C wasn't a real strategy for them until the pandemic hit, like most brands, and so they saw the opportunity for D2C business, and so that's when they really started investing in D2C. So, really what was important was to build that foundation and to have that, agile e-commerce platform to be able to expand globally, to be scalable past, a U.S., it was basically a U.S.-centric market and a small European market. But as we know, there's so much more opportunity out there, for e-commerce. So it was really about building, again, that foundation and then taking the next steps to be scalable and grow within a lot of other emerging markets.
Yeah, and I'm glad that, David talked, just on profitability, and again, managing, profitability. And I think, it is something that we see, that maturity spectrum, and being quite important in terms of where are we at today, where are we kind of going, towards. Martim, you've talked a little bit, in some of our prep calls around having that right mix of services. If you can talk to that, in terms of, how you would, work with a brand to kind of say what's right for today versus what's something that we may need to, again, have in the roadmap for a year or two down the line.
Yeah. I think, Jim, that it depends on the life stage that a brand is in, right? So today, with our experience, we work with about 150 brands in our platform. We run about $2 billion worth of cross-merchandising value across 200 markets. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There's definitely signs in the market that will enable you to spot where the demand sits. It also depends on your brand awareness, your brand equity, your maturity, which channels do you have. Do you have offline presence? Do you have brick and mortars? Do you have wholesale marketplaces in some of those regions? For us, traditionally, we come from the cross-border space, which obviously gives the ability for brands to unlock and open up international countries. But there's a moment in time, there's an inflection point where we see an opportunity for a brand to move in country. And for us, you're not going to go multi-local in every single country, right? So it needs a certain baseline demand, and definitely you need to be mature and you need to be prepared to invest. It does not happen overnight. In fact, we've worked, for example, with McKinsey when we onboard one of our customers, and they came up with the recommendation that it would take circa 2 to 3 years for a brand to mature their DTC experience as well. We've had a number of cases where we moved from a pure cross-border player into multi-local, and in places like Mexico, Australia, or Canada, for example. And when we've done that transition of us helping the brand to localize inventory into a 3PL facility managed by ourselves, we've seen growth moving away from linear to exponential, right? And I'm talking about high double-digit to triple-digit growth because you fully localize their experience to the consumer.
We often encourage clients to again, plan to inflection points, as you referred to. Any examples, of inflection points that you suggest to partners, they be watching out for? When do you know you're ready to move to that next stage?
Good question. There's multiple signs in the marketplace, and depends, of course, on your revenue and your maturity as a brand and what level of recognition do you have. It also depends on your capability to invest and reinvest some of your profits in order to make sure that you can build a sustainable model going forward.
Yeah, and Michelle, you've talked about this in terms of, kind of be careful to blindly support the business. As much as we'd love to, again, have this domestic equivalent customer experience everywhere, really there's a fiscal responsibility, that's required. Again, can you share any examples of, where, you got the service mix right, or maybe you were a little bit ahead of the market or so on? Any examples that kind of, come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important, as Martin said, that you really need to have kind of like boots on the ground if you really want to run a multi-local approach. And that's not to say you need a full blown out team, but you do need to have that local expertise from a customer standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from a customer service standpoint, and operations. So like those key foundations really need to be over there if you do want to have this in-market business running. And, it is a crawl, walk, run phase. So that, if you don't have that, then start off with marketplaces, really test the waters to understand what the consumer demand is over there, and then, maybe go into cross-border, and then as customer expectations get higher and greater, then maybe that's a time to really invest. And so I think that's right. It really does take at least 2 to 3 years to understand and really get to that maturity of being in market and fully running operations there. And then even still, it takes a few years to really grow that demand and grow that maturity once you are in market. So it does differ, and you do need to test the waters and be agile.
And that's kind of a perfect segue into, again, where we wanted to talk about what does that, evolution look like, and
exactly.
Martim, I don't know if you want to just start. We talked a little bit, around the merchandise and inventory, planning. We know that that's just so central to how do we again, do this right, for where we're at in this evolution.
Yeah, definitely. So for us, it's always important to maximize distance and speed to market, and making sure that the time that it takes to connect a brand with a consumer is as efficient as possible, right? And this is really a journey, right? When you start your brand and you're going internationally, you start typically cross-border, you're shipping out of a single DC into the world, and that's usually the first stage or the first phase. We look at, for us, the formula, it's about launching and then amplifying and maximizing the opportunity, and you evolve in your strategy, in your fulfillment models, eventually positioning a regional DC, unlocking omni-channel opportunities, making the marketplaces or local partners part of the opportunity. Think of a scenario as a brand. If you're a US brand and you're shipping into the Nordics, as an example, right, and you may have a local partner in Sweden. If you're a shopper, if you're a consumer, you're going to the website, you're browsing the website, you may pick 2, 3 SKUs in your shopper's basket, you check out. One SKU can be fulfilled locally by your local partner. One SKU can be fulfilled by yourself in a regional DC that you may have in Netherlands to supply the neighborhood countries as well. And one SKU will be fulfilled cross-border from the US. And so this is what we call inventory anywhere, the ability for you to maximize your catalog, keeping in mind the consumer front and center, right? And so that's the beauty of the model, right? And for the shopper, it's still a pretty good experience. It's single payment, single checkout, and you have different delivery dates per se. And you enable the local distributor as part of the e-commerce opportunity as well.
Michelle, maybe you could provide some examples from the Logitech gaming business, which in the past you've talked about how much demand there is globally for that. But obviously you kind of mentioned that you had these existing partners, distribution partners, globally. How did you manage what Martim was talking about in terms of where do you draw that inventory from? Again, that seems complex.
Yeah. It's whether it's gaming or any other products, you really do need to have that mix on inventory and then your pricing strategy. Pricing is very important, as you all know, and it's a race to the bottom for brands if you really want to be price competitive. So how do you find other ways to win when you're not going to be, the lowest price out there, but that's having the inventory position? And so it's really finding that right mix and that right opportunity. And those inventory positions will differ throughout the world, and the demand will differ. So those products that are hot in one country or one region, will differ from another. So it's not a perfect equation of being able to have inventory on hand, but then being able to have multi options of shipping from different markets or different regions. And with that comes consumer expectations, where it may take a little bit longer to get some of those products, but having those open sources and opportunities will help fulfill on those customer expectations, because that's the biggest key is meeting those customer demands, because if you lose that, then you'll lose the customer for life. And so you want to, as a brand, always be able to deliver on that customer experience, whether it be pre-purchase or post-purchase, and always meet them where they are.
Yeah, and we've had brands that work with us, that the way they look at inventory, there's different strategies in terms of planning. You may position what we call high volume SKUs, you may position them in country or in the regional DC, where you focus maybe for cross-border high value SKUs or items, right? So today, for us, this sounds complex, and it is, in terms of there's multiple integration points for you to be able to unlock that unified e-commerce experience. We love complexity. We're all about enterprise-sized brands, right? That's what we do for a living. We power some of the world's best brands. We have the privilege to work with Nike, as an example, Victoria's Secrets, D2, we run D2 too. We run globally, domestic and internationally, right? And with some of these partners, we started off cross-border, a single DC, and we've evolved into bonded facilities, unlocking regional DCs in different locations of the world. And in some cases, we moved in country, like Mexico, Australia, Canada. And for us, next frontiers, India is another massive growing opportunity with a lot of complexity if you're doing cross-border in the whole tax and duty world.
Mm-hmm. And I think, one other thing to note is that, as brands, we can't always fulfill in every country or region, but there were times when, if we didn't have direct fulfillment, we did, link off to marketplaces or other retailers where you could buy, and that's okay. As a brand, and your direct-to-consumer site isn't just for direct revenue; it's also to help service indirect revenue, because you want your customers to ultimately buy your product, and your digital flagship should have the content and the best product information to help a buyer in that decision. And so if you can't help fulfill them directly, and also a customer chooses where they want to shop, then be able to help them fulfill wherever your products are sold. So understanding that and being able to add that as part of the mix, and know that that's what your role is for your direct-to-consumer site as well.
Yeah. Michelle, you touched briefly on the importance of pricing. I'm just curious, if you've always kind of gone to market, where price is inclusive of duties, taxes, everything. If it were a cross-border model and so on? Or is it something that you kind of look at the local consumer expectations, right? And decide, okay, what's how we present, how we price ourselves, needs to be kind of tailored to that market.
Yeah, for the most part, consumers want to see all the prices inclusive. They don't really want to be surprised. What's key, I think, is more about being able to service them on all the payments that they expect. And so, even still in Japan, cash on delivery is big. So being able to add that as an option is more important. But yes, pricing usually was inclusive of all of duties and tax and shipping.
Mm-hmm. One of the themes that we wanted to touch upon, you'll hear this, is sustainability. Martim, do you want to just talk about that again, and why again, this evolution is, kind of plays into that? Is that a common talking point? You're hearing it more so, from
more and more often, definitely, right. And I think this multi-local evolution talks a lot about that sustainability with the ability for you to reduce your carbon footprint as you near shore your inventory and localize it closer to the consumer. That will hopefully reduce your carbon footprint. So that's one of the key topics. I think also when we haven't touched on data, and Michelle was talking about the consumer and the preferences of the different markets. I think what we have is the ability to help brands and retailers to understand what's the right e-commerce proposition. And if you're talking about a consumer or a shopper in Korea versus Mexico or Japan, there are very different, distinctive experiences in those countries. And therefore, we help brands to accelerate the curve to get to market, right? Making sure that you have a playbook that will define what's the right e-commerce proposition. And if you're talking about payment methods, again, cash on delivery, it's also big in Italy. And then so that's what we would tell you. It's not about the quantity of methods or that we would enable, but it's what's the right mix for you to maximize your payment success rates. And so that's what we bring is the playbook, knowledge, demand profile against zip codes and regions, and we touch a multitude of different verticals. So there's a lot of knowledge across fashion, beauty, luxury, and more recently consumer electronics as well.
And Michelle, how much is sustainability factoring into operating decisions in some cases?
Yeah, I mean, at Logitech, it was one of our core values, and we were a leader in the tech world to be we were carbon neutral a few years ago, and then on our way to carbon negative. So it played a huge part of all the decisions that we made, and it wasn't just about a corporate decision. Customers are expecting that as well, and we did a lot of testing and content around that messaging and how does it resonate with our consumers and more so in a customer-friendly way rather than a lot of this jargon that didn't make sense and they didn't understand. But it definitely did resonate with customers, and the expectations are that they're expecting more and more brands to be sustainable, to showcase those sustainable efforts, and they're buying more brands because of that, and so that's a power of choice. So. Definitely powerful to be sustainable and to show it, right? And to talk the talk and walk the walk as well.
Yeah. No, again, that's great to hear. Let's talk a little bit around demand generation, customer loyalty and so on. And Martim, I'll ask you to kind of just as you're talking to clients around, the move to, multi-local, what does that mean, in terms of, local marketing? Then Michelle can kind of provide more examples.
Yeah. So it means that you need obviously to make sure you have the right product mix to service that market in a multi-local fashion. It means the ability for you to localize your catalog, localize your promotions, and making sure that they're aligned with local holidays, right? So it's part of the strategy when we're moving into a multi-local proposition with our partner brands that you need to make sure that you understand the consumer, what the expectations are, what's the market size, the appetite, who are the right players across the different channels, and therefore build your strategy and again continue to reinvest in that sustainable profit expansion.
And Michelle, how has that played out for you? I know a couple of years ago you were talking about really pushing into the Mexican market and so on. Was that a good example where you did really kind of tailor the marketing mix?
Yeah, I think marketing is one of the key positions that you need to have locally and in market or in region, because to really understand that customer and the marketing mix is really key. It's also a good way for brands that aren't as well known to start. It starts with the marketing and building that brand awareness and being able to generate that customer demand, because it's great if you set up a site, but your customers don't know who you are, how to get there, then you're as good as not being there. So marketing plays a huge part and a huge investment when you're launching into new markets and emerging markets, for sure.
I was just going to say that in Mexico, for example, loyalty is a big thing, right? And so we're seeing a lot of the consumers, they buy via mobile and apps, right? And some of our partners, they have high-heated product drops released specifically in the apps for specific customers. So it's a very localized market with very specific needs and preferences, and therefore you need to make sure that you cater for the consumer preferences.
And I'm sure it's a market that many of those in the audience, are kind of working on right now. Let's kind of, wrap up on really again, the roadmap, the path. Martim, do you just want to talk towards, this framework?
Yes. So for us, this is a framework. It's the way we would operate and bring customers on a journey. And again, depending on their life cycle and what stage the brands are. But for us, traditionally, it starts with launching the brand and opening up different international countries, and then from there, test the different markets and learn based on the demand and the consumer sentiments. So it's about basic localization, making sure that you have the right payment mix, the right supply chain, and you build that localized checkout experience for your consumers internationally. From there, that's where you want to evolve. It's how do you maximize or amplify the business? And that's where different business models comes into play. The ability for you to maybe mitigate tax and duty exposures, B2B to C models, enabling duty drawback programs, starting to eventually think regional fulfillment, and from there starting to think omnichannel. Lastly, where you would want to end up, it's about maximizing the opportunity, and that's the journey that we were saying that this probably takes you anywhere from 18 to 36 months, probably to get you to the end stage with that multi-local vision. But that's truly where you maximize the opportunity, right? It's where you unlock the omnichannel experience, inventory anywhere, ship from anywhere to the consumer. You can launch high-heated product drops. You can enable flash sales, private sales to drive specific local demand as well. But that's the type of model and framework that we typically use with our partners in the enterprise world.
Michelle, if you could comment on that from how you have helped your counterparts, in the leadership team, really how to manage their expectations for what this growth curve, could look like. Because, knowing where you've gone into, companies, branded manufacturers have little, direct consumer, kind of, background. I'm sure that's been a big part of your job in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a hockey stick. It is a curve, and to manage expectations is key, especially when ROI is expected. I think one other key thing is also showing the opportunity and the cost of not investing and the cost of not going into these markets. That fear and that FOMO really helps resonate as well. So I think that's one thing that I've been successful at doing as well. But to what Martim was saying, it's focusing on the foundation, delivering on that customer frictionless experience, and getting that right, is key. And so before you start, putting your gas and trying to mature, it is really focusing on delivering on the basics before you start adding the bells and whistles and moving fast. It's delivering on that, and then the rest will follow.
That's great. Well, are there any questions from the audience before we kind of wrap things up? Yes, at the back.
This is on, yeah. So do you guys own these warehouses where you guys have your WMS system set up from scratch all around the world, or you guys partner with certain enterprises or companies who are already in these countries? And then from there you move forward?
Both, actually. So we have our own physical infrastructure when it comes to distribution centers and return center with a fairly global footprint. But of course, what we do is we're all about bespoke customization. And so we probably will adjust and adapt depending on the brands, the countries, the vertical that they play in. And therefore, we partnered with multiple 3PLs with who we have direct integrations with.
Great. Well, with that, I think everyone here has probably earned a refreshment break here. Again, we really thank everyone for again joining this opening part. I do want to again say very briefly that we're after the break. It's a short 15-minute break. We're going to be splitting into two rooms. We're going to be talking in our innovation showcase, next door, talking generative AI as well as sustainability. And so again, grab a drink. And again, let's thank our speakers here today. Thank you so much.